lot.
Um,
No, I think the provenance is really important. And if I were to look at the highlighted points, I think having a founder that was anonymous or pseudonymous is important. I think the founder disappearing is also important. I think that the fact that the Satoshi coins never moved is also important. I think the lack of an initial coin offering is also important. I think the lack of a corporate sponsor is important. I think the fact that it traded for 15 months with no commercial value was also important. I think that the simplicity of the protocol is very important. I think that the outcome of the block size wars is very important. And all of those things add up to common property. They're all indicators of a digital property as opposed to security. If there was a Satoshi sitting on top of
Blue Chip Crypto 3. Now, I wanted to bring you guys this recent update. This is Michael Saylor talking about Satoshi Nakamoto, and who gave us this God money, who gave us this technology, because it's a great mystery, and it's a great mystery worth either trying to figure out, trying to solve, but it's going to expand on what Bitcoin is and give you some further education and background information on what it is. So sit back, put your seatbelts on, and enjoy the ride. If you like what you're seeing so far, I'm gonna give credit to the creator. The sourcing is going to be right in the description, so go check the creator out as well. Let's go.
$50 billion worth of Bitcoin. I don't think it would cripple Bitcoin as property, but I think it would undermine its digital property. And if I wanted to undermine a crypto asset network, I would do the opposite of all those things. I would launch one myself. I would sell 25% or 50% to the general public. I would keep some of the initial, I would pre-mine some stuff or early mine it, and I would keep an influence on it. Those are all the opposite of what you would do in order to create common property. And so I see the entire story as Satoshi giving a gift of digital property to the human race and disappearing.
do you think?
I think it's God's gift. I think it's God's money. I think it's a better way of bridging and giving the people the right to actually become their own bank, to actually bank on themselves. I think that, and we just speculating here, I just think that it's going to be beneficial to society to know that, hey, you can literally pass down generational wealth just by owning something that has tremendous value and or the people view as value. That's what I personally think. Leave your thoughts down below. What do you think? What do you think Bitcoin was designed for? Who do you think it was designed for? Whom do you think designed it and why? Let me know. Expound on it.
You think it was one person? Do you have ideas of who it could be?
I don't care to speculate.
Okay. But do you think it was one person? Like
I think it was one person, maybe in conjunction with a bunch of others. I mean, it might have been a group of people that were working together, but certainly there's a Satoshi.
I mean, it's just so fascinating to me that one person could be so brave and thoughtful. Or do you think a lot of it is accident, like the block size wars, the decision to make a block a certain size? All the things you mentioned led up to the characteristics that make Bitcoin property. Do you think that's an accident, or was it deeply thought through? Like, this is almost like a history of science question.
People tried it they tried 40 of them, right? I mean, I think there's a history of attempting to create something like this, and it was tried many, many times, and they failed for different reasons. And I think that it's like Prometheus tried to start a fire 47 times, and maybe the 48th time it sparked. And that's how I see this. This is the first one that sparked, and it sets a roadmap for us. And I think if you're looking for any one word that characterizes, it's fair, right? The whole point of the network is it's a fair launch, a fair distribution. Like, yeah, I have Bitcoin, but
it's for the people. That's what makes it so fair. It's literally transferring power to the individual. not to entities, but to the individual, not to government, but to directly to the individual.
Bought it. In fact, at this point, we've paid $4 billion of real cash to buy it. If I was sitting on the same position and I had it for free, then there's always this question of, did I pay, or I bought it for a nickel a coin or a penny a coin. The question is, was it fair? And that's a very hard question to answer, right? Did you acquire the Bitcoin that you own fairly? And if you roll the clock back, you could have bought it for a nickel or a dime, but that was when it was a million times more likely to fail. Mm-hmm. Right? When the risk was greater, the cost was lower. And then over time, the risk became lower and the cost became greater. And the real critical thing was to allow the marketplace, absent any powerful interested actor. Right? It's almost like if Satoshi had held 1 million coins and then stayed engaged for 10 more years, tweaking things in the background, there'd still be that question. But what we've got is really a beautiful thing. We've got a chain reaction in cyberspace, or an ideology spreading virally in the world that has seasoned in a fair, ethical fashion. Sometimes it's a very violent, brutal fashion with all the volatility, right? And there's been a lot of sound and fury along the way.
How do you psychoanalyze? How do you deal from a financial, from a human perspective with the volatility? You mentioned you could have gotten it for a nickel and the risk was great. Where's the risk today? What's your sense?
We're 13 years into this entire activity. I think the risk has never been lower. If you look at all the risks, right? The risks in the early years are.
And I agree with exactly what he just said. This is the perfect time because mass adoption will happen. What happens when it's like 7 to 8%, and a lot of people know about it? Right now, it's just a measly 1%. Mostly people around the world still don't know what a Bitcoin is. When I ask people, they still don't know. No one knows. No one truly really knows. So you could say that I knew about this for 10 years. This is this 13th year cycle. No, I knew about this about 8 years. 8 years to be exact. 2024, by 2017, 2018. So about 8 years roughly. 2016, 27, end of 2016. How long did you know about this? How long did you know about this? And where did you learn about this? Where did you learn about Bitcoin?
Is the engineering protocol proper? Like 1 megabyte block size, 10-minute clock frequency, cryptography is first, will it be hacked or will it crash? Mm-hmm. 730,000 blocks and it hasn't crashed. Will it be hacked? Hasn't been hacked. But, it's a Lindy thing, right? You wait 13 years to see if it'll be hacked. But on the other hand, with $1 billion, it's not as interesting a target as it is with 100 billion. And when it gets to be worth $1 trillion, then it's a bigger target. So the risk has been bleeding off over time as the network monetized. I think the second question is, will it be banned? You couldn't know. It literally could have been banned at any time, many times early on. In fact, in 2013, I tweeted on the subject. I thought it would be banned. Mm-hmm. I made a very infamous tweet.
People like, I know the Chinese economy, they say that they banned it, but I checked they records and they still had it on their balance sheet. But it was it was literally banned for people to have it, right? And they frowned upon it. You remember the news media? It's a scam. It's for drug dealers. It's for scammers. It's for people with that's not morally inclined. It's for crime. It's for all these things. But what it's actually for, it's the fact that it allowed you to have some form of freedom. Just a little ounce of it. Just a hint of it. A lime in the coconut of it. It allowed you to have some form of freedom. No one likes when you can be free. Everyone wants to control thee. Let me repeat. No one likes when the people could be free. Everyone makes money off controlling thee. So it's literally was taking money out of the normal nuances that generally happen on a day-to-day basis. But that's no longer. That's coming to an end. What's your thoughts on it?
Famous tweet,
I
yeah.
thought it was going to be banned. In 2014, the IRS designated it as property and gave it property tax treatment. Okay, so they could have given it a tax treatment where you had to pay tax on the unrealized capital gains every year, and it probably would have crushed it to death, right? You know, so it could have been in any number of places banned by a government, but in fact it was legitimized as property. And then the question is, would it be hacked or would it be copied? Will it be something better than that? And it was copied 15,000 times. And you know the story of all those. And they either diverged to be something totally different and not comparable, or someone trying to copy a non-sovereign bearer instrument store of value found that their networks crashed to be 1% of what Bitcoin is. So now we're sitting at a point where all those risks are out of the way. I would say that year one of institutional adoption is it started August 2020. That's when MicroStrategy bought $250 million worth of Bitcoin, and we put that out on the wire. We were the first publicly traded company to actually buy Bitcoin. I don't think you could have found a $5 million purchase from a public company before we did that. So that was kind of like a gun going off. And then in the next 12 months, Tesla bought Bitcoin, Square bought Bitcoin. And I'd say now we're in year two of institutional adoption. And there are about 24, should be 24 publicly traded Bitcoin miners by the end of this quarter. So you're looking at 36 publicly traded companies, and you've got 50, at least in the range of $50 billion on the balance of Bitcoin on the balance sheet of publicly traded companies, and hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap.
Do you hear that? First, he was the first person who did it with MicroStrategy. Then Tesla did it, second in line. Then Square. And I believe that if you have a business, you should have this on your balance sheet. If you want your business to automatically be for profit, and or if you want your business not to pay taxes as well. I'm just saying. It has so many benefits of actually operating cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin.
Bitcoin exposed companies. So I would say the asset, decade one was entrepreneurial, experimental. Decade two is a rotation from entrepreneurs to institutions, and is becoming institutionalized. So maybe decade one, you go from 0 to $1 trillion, and in decade two, you go from 1 trillion to 100 trillion.
What about governments? Government adoption, you said institutional adoption. Are governments important in this? Maybe making it, some governments incorporating it into as a currency into their banks, all that kind of stuff. Is that important? And if it is, when will it happen?
It's not essential for the success of the asset class, but I think it's inevitable in various degrees over time. But the most likely thing to happen next is large acquisitions by institutional investors of Bitcoin as a digital gold, where they're just swapping out gold for digital gold and thinking of it like that. And the government entities most likely to be involved with that would be sovereign wealth funds. If you look at all the sovereign wealth funds that are holding big tech stock, equities, the Swiss, the Norwegians, the Middle Easterners, if you can hold big tech, then holding digital gold would be, not far removed from that. That's a non-controversial adoption. I think there are opportunities for governments that are much more profound, right? If a government started to adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset, that's much bigger than just an asset investment. That's 100x bigger. And you could imagine that's like $1 trillion opportunity. Like any government that wanted to adopt it as a treasury reserve asset would probably generate trillions of dollars, trillion or more of value. And then, the thing that people think about is, well, will oil ever be priced in Bitcoin or any other export commodity? I think there's like $1.8 trillion or more of export commodities in the world, and right now they're all priced in dollars. I think that this is a colorful thing, but it's not really that relevant. Like, you could sell all that stuff in dollars. The relevant decision that any institution makes, whether they're a nonprofit, a university, a corporation, or a government, is what's your treasury reserve asset. And if your treasury reserve asset is the peso, and if the peso is losing 20% or 30% of its value a year, then your balance sheet is collapsing within 5 years. And if the treasury reserve asset is dollars and currency derivatives and U.S. treasuries, then you're getting your right now it's probably 15% or more monetary inflation. We're running double the historic average. You could argue triple, somewhere between double and triple, depending upon.
Hi, Spencer Raskoff, co-founder and chair of Picasso, coming to you from Harvard, where when I'm not working on Picasso.
So, do I think it'll happen? I think that they're conservative, but they have to be shocked. And I think there is a shock. The late Russian sanctions are a big shock, that when the West sees $300 billion worth of Russian gold and currency.
Yeah, it's come to talk about that. Did y'all know that Russia the other day just said that they will legalize Bitcoin? That's great news for the space. Let's continue.
Derivatives, I think you got the famous quote by Putin that, we have to rethink our treasury strategies, and that pushes everybody toward a commodity strategy. What commodities do I want to hold? I think that's got a lot of people thinking. I think it's got the Chinese thinking. Everybody wants to be the reserve currency, right? So if I buy $50 billion worth of dollars every year, then I buy 500 billion over a decade, and I probably pay $250 billion of inflation cost on the backs of my citizens in a decade. So
inflation could be one of the sources of shock. And you wonder if there is a switch to Bitcoin, whether it will be a bang or a whimper. Like, what is the nature of the shock or the transition?
I think that the year 2022 is pretty catalytic for digital assets in general, and for Bitcoin in particular. The Canadian trucker crisis, I think, educated hundreds of millions of people and made them start questioning their property rights and their banks. I think the Ukraine war was a second shock, but I think that the Russian sanctions was a third shock.
Yeah.
I think all three of them, and I think hyperinflation in the rest of the world is a fourth shock, and then persistent inflation in the US is a fifth shock. So I think it's a perfect storm. And if you put all these events together, what do they signify? They signify the rational conclusion for any person thinking about this is, I'm not sure if I can trust my property. I don't know if I have property rights. I don't know if I can trust the bank. And if I'm politically at odds with the leader of my own country, I'm going to lose my property. And if I'm politically at odds with the owner of another country, I'm still going to lose my property. And when push comes to shove, the banks will freeze my assets and seize them. And I think that that is playing out in front of everybody in the world.
And all of these things, these negative aspects that he said about it, is actually how Bitcoin actually stands and reigns supreme about these things. The bank freezing your money, they can't freeze your Bitcoin if it's on your ledger. The bank, the government going to war, they could take your property, but they can't take your Bitcoin because it's not on their governmental property. So therefore, you take that with you. Yeah, they can come and take you, but it's different ways to move money around. So this actually make Bitcoin, in a sense, It's recession proof, it's inflation proof, it's hyperinflation proof. It's so many different proofs. It's so many different proofs. This method was well thought of. But let's continue.
Such that your logical response would be, I'm going to convert my weak currency to a strong currency. Like I'll convert my peso and lira to the dollar. I'm going to convert my weak property to strong property. I'm going to sell my building downtown Moscow, and I'd rather own a building in New York City. I'd rather own in a powerful nation than be stuck with a building in Nigeria or a building in Argentina or whatever. So I'm going to sell my weak properties to buy strong properties. I'm going to convert my physical assets to digital assets. I'd rather own a digital building than own a physical building. Because if I had $1 billion building in Moscow, who can I rent that to? But if I have $1 billion digital building, I can rent it to anybody in any city in the world, anybody with money, and the maintenance cost is almost nothing, and I can hold it for 100 years. Okay, so it's an indestructible building. And then finally, I want to move from having my assets in a bank with a counterparty to self-custody assets, right? So, and this is not, it's not just Ukraine, but this is like the story in Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, South America. You don't really want to be sitting with $10 million in a bank in Istanbul.
That is actually a great concept. I never thought about it like this. Now, this is why I think NFT is so important, and or digital real estate is so important, because listen to what was said. And it was an eye-opener for me. Why would you own a physical building when the world is becoming digitized? And imagine if you have a building where all the who's who, all the what's what, all the technology, all the hands-on things. You can use the metaverse glasses. You can do all these things, but in order to get access to these rooms, you need a Bitcoin. You need some form of currency, some form of trade in order to enter. The maintenance, 0 to nothing. Right? The profit margin skyrockets. To me, that's a great business plan. That is a great business plan. High profit margins is actually great. So imagine what your kids will do if they want to go to class and go to school. And I would say go to a mentorship. And in order to put these glasses on, in order to log into the digital building, you would need some form of currency to access the information that you would then need in order to carry out either in the real world, or if you want to stay on the digital platform, you can literally carry it out on the digital platform. So infrastructure is actually changing. Digital infrastructure will change. How we interact with one another, each other, will also change. So this is the time of the great change and the great switch. This is actually ingenious. I support Bitcoin all the way, because the more and more I educate myself on it, and I go through these things to educate myself and educate you guys as well at the same time by bringing you the latest review. And yes, I take the greatest artists take things from others, right? And then we put our own little twist and spin on it. That's why I call this my audio reaction channel. So we're just going to react to these things while learning at the same time. And Michael Saylor is actually ingenious. There's a few things I learned from him as well, because he actually did his homework on this technology. And to me, it is God's technology. It is God's technology. It allows your kids to build indefinitely, which means that they can build a world beyond this world. So then the question would be, would you say that, in order for these things to work, what about space? Space being the amount of data that it takes in order to build these things. Space. Because I noticed something with these phones or different technology. If you don't have any space, any RAM, random access memory, any type of space, how do these things work? They don't. So, which cryptocurrency allows you to have space? Storage. Because think about that digital world as if it's our world as well. If we are living on land and we run out of space, we begin to build up, correct? So, which cryptocurrency allows you to build, allow you to have the maximum storage and or the maximum space that you can then within that cryptocurrency add your transaction, which can be Bitcoin, XRP, or whatever you want it to be, or some type of swap. And then which cryptocurrency or which technology allow you to then produce and or create the infrastructure that's needed, or the experience, the services and or good. So would it make sense to actually create physical products? I think it would make sense to create digital products as far as clothing, as far as buildings, as far as entertainment, as far as food, as far as ambiance, because that's what the world's leading to. And the transaction will be cryptocurrency. The reserve will be gold. You might not want to spend that, but you may want to have a small bag of something else, a nice satchel or something else for your day-to-day digital lifestyle. Then this become the questions too. If you can live after death and then come back into these realms, what if you design something, right? Because we let's take it all the way here. My mind is racing. What if you then design something that you can then return to? Because we was taught about we have a quantum computer, which is our brain, and if we want to live beyond this and download our consciousness inside of what we have built, inside of the digital properties, inside of the digital theaters, inside of the digital products, inside of the digital services, then who's to say that we're not creating the world right in front of us within the computer screen? I was told life is like a computer. Who agree? Leave your thoughts down below. I really want to know what you think. This is another episode, the audio reaction of Blue Chip Crypto 3. Smash that like button. Nonetheless, love, love, love.